I have told all of the men in the platform that they're not allowed to talk about this because it sounds tokenistic, but I'm going to do it because I'm a woman and a hypocrite, and I'm allowed to do these things. We set out to do this event and went and looked for the best people that we knew to speak on Mary Brooksbank and sing on Mary Brooksbank. And with that mindset of we need to find the absolute best people to do it, it was remarkable and really touching and very exciting for me that all the people we found were women. And that, I think, speaks to something very, very important about our politics, which is that if you set up genuinely radical working class politics, if you set up politics that respect the things that make life worth living, then women will come. They will come and they will be a part of your politics, and they will be a part of your group, and they will be a part of the fight for something better. And you don't need to hire expensive PR firms to do it, funnily enough. So, without further ado, I am going to start with someone who I'm very, very excited to hear speak, Siobhan Holland, who did her PhD on Mary Brooksbank and is an absolutely fabulous PhD. If you have the time to read it, definitely do. It is somewhere online. I'll try and put the link on the Facebook event. And I'm now going to pass off to Siobhan to speak. Everybody, clap her in.
Can everybody hear me? I feel a bit, oh God, how do I stand, how do I think after that? I was just thinking about Mary Brooksbank recently and how I kind of came to write about her. And, I was brought up, in a household where Mary Brooksbank was like the local hero, and Mary did this, and Mary said that, and so on and so forth. And it was always that kind of understanding that, for working class struggles, that's where Mary stood. And in kind of my total naivety, when I started studying at the Open University, and I kind of started talking about Mary Brooksbank, and I genuinely just assumed that everybody knew about her, and I was like, who's that? And it was like, well, it's Mary Brooksbank, it's like, no, nobody's ever heard her. And that's kind of one of the reasons I thought, if I ever end up going on to do a dissertation, what I'll do is write about Mary, because it was one of those voices, I think, that needed to be aired and needed to be understood, I think, in a kind of wider level. I think for me though, what's interesting about Mary is that her struggles, we're fighting the exact same struggles. Mary Brooksbank was born, she lived through war, she lived through trauma, she lost loved ones and family through poverty, through war. And it was these constant struggles about trying to make life better, and that was the driving force for Mary. There was kind of a lot of political machinations and stuff that she was involved in, but the driving force was effectively to bring equality, to bring social justice, and to bring community into the heart of those decision-making processes as well. When she come to write her autobiography, one of the things that she wanted to do was actually, because she saw she was inspired of the struggles of the 1960s. This was, Mary died in the 70s, but she was inspired by the struggles of the 60s, and she wanted to create an intergenerational hand of friendship between her struggles and the struggles of her generation and the younger generation as well. And I think that that's something that we should all be mindful of, that these struggles, when we gain, we've always got to fight to keep what we gain. And these are the struggles that once we gain them, we have to make sure that we never lose them. And it's that constant back and forth battle that I think we're constantly having. And that's maybe perhaps the more depressing side of it, is that we fight the same old battles again and again. I think for Mary, that was her kind of idea, was to just bring social justice into the heart of the young population at that stage, and to offer that kind of advice and guidance. And I think that we're standing here now, and I think it's perhaps the same thing, and no offence to people, but we're all maybe perhaps, how shall I say, over 40, maybe most of it, so, and there is that kind of element here of, but we have to find a way to reach out to the younger people in the same way that Mary did as well. I think also, if we think about kind of Mary Brooksbank's struggles, I think that, and the issue of the women is something that I really would like to touch on as well, because we've got all women presenting Mary and talking about Mary. There's something about female struggle in Dundee that Mary is absolutely archetypal of. There is something, and I think it is based in the notions of community, and I think maybe somewhat controversial, it's based in the notions of family as well, that, what's the poem she says, could the love we mark at home rule the world out by the same, and it's that sense of collective friendship, understanding that the individual is only safe when the collective is safe. Now, if ever we saw a lesson for that, it's COVID and it's the pandemic. And it's basically none of us are safe until all of us are safe. And I think that that principle is something that drove Mary, and I think it's a principle that drives us still today at this point in time. And I think that women are usually at the centre of that, especially in Dundee. Mary was an exceptional woman. She was creative, she was articulate, she was a pain in the arse to a lot of people, and that was in a good way, you know. But at the same time, there are millions of Marys across the globe. There are millions of women, there are millions of people who will never give up a struggle for a better world and will never give up the fight for social justice. So Mary is at once exceptional, but also almost in every woman as well. I can see numerous examples of women like Mary in this crowd and in this audience that actually pushes the struggle forward. And I think that that's one of the legacies that Mary has given, is that we just have to keep on fighting. The reason I became involved in politics was precisely because I wanted my son to understand that the battles never end, that you have to fight for those issues. We have to fight for social justice, and the fight for equality will always, always continue. And I think that Mary is a perfect example of that here in Dundee, and I think across the globe as well, that she's that kind of, she's that kind of symbolic element of the struggle, I think. I think that's, for me, that's kind of, all I have to say about Mary. I think that the inspiration that she can bring is absolutely amazing. I'm just going to finish with just a very, very short quote from one of her poems. Politicians and rulers are richly rewarded, but in this one woman's life is our history recorded. And I think that if we look at Mary's life, if we look at the struggles that she presented and the voice she tried to give to the poverty-stricken within the city, then I think that we can understand that and move forward and modernise that legacy that she brings. Mary Brooksbank is now cool, and I think that that's maybe how I'm going to end.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that is brilliant, and brings a tear to my eye. I am a sap though, so no judgment if you're not crying. Just a couple quick announcements. One of them to touch on this idea of community. We are taking donations, collecting donations today for the Lochee Larder. If you're not aware of the Lochee Larder, it is one of the most brilliant community movements groups here in the city and probably in Scotland, just to flex. The idea behind the larder is that you pay £2 and you get a bag full of groceries picked by yourself to take home to your family. You don't need a referral like normal food banks. It is all about making sure that our communities are taking care of one another. We are collecting for a whole wide variety of things to bring to them. So please, if you have cash or if you have cans with you, hand them over to Connor, who's now looking very scared because he doesn't have a bag with him, but I'm sure he will solve that. And then the second announcement is quite a bit sadder, but it is absolutely necessary. You may have seen a card being passed around. Yesterday, in Bristol, a Kill the Bill protester was sentenced to 14 years for protesting against the massive police state overreach. Any police state is an overreach, but the British Parliament worked very, very hard, and the British state worked very, very hard to engineer a massive encroachment into our civil liberties on the back of the brutal murder of Sarah Everard. There were a litany of brave protesters who went out and rightfully protested against the bill, and the British state has brought the hammer down on many of them. One of them has now been given 14 years, which is fucking insane. And we are passing around a card. Please do sign it. It is a very, very small act of solidarity, but it will go quite a long way. On that really grim note, I am now going to introduce one of the other millions of Marys, to quote Siobhan out there, who is Mary McGregor, who is absolutely fabulous, an icon of Dundee, and who is going to speak for us a little bit on the other Mary. And then after that, we're going to hear her and do a little singing.
Thanks very much. I don't know. Mary Brooksbank, mill worker, writer, poet, musician, class fighter, trade unionist and revolutionary. How wonderful is it to be holding a commemoration and a celebration of the birth of this inspirational woman. Now, I'm no one who's in favour of the cult of the individual, but there are some people who should be remembered for what they've done and what they represent in the struggle to liberate humanity. Mary Brooksbank was one such individual. So many members of our class have been airbrushed out of history. So many women who have stolidly and bravely laid their colours to the mast have been made invisible or sanitised or silenced to fit in with a bourgeois narrative. It's our duty, I believe, to make sure that our children and their children know about the lives of these folk, our folk. There are people here like Siobhan who can tell you about the history of Mary Brooksbank and give you all the details, and I think that's absolutely fabulous. And I would reiterate, if you get a chance to read Siobhan's dissertation, you should do so to learn about Mary Brooksbank. But I actually feel very fortunate that because of my advancing years, because of my age, I was breathing the same air and walking the same streets at the same time as this remarkable woman. I came to Dundee in 1975 and it's been my home ever since then. Mary dies in 1978. We could have passed in the street. We could have met in the shops. We could have been comrades. But, like Siobhan says, I didn't know anything about that woman at that time. I wasn't frae Dundee, so I didn't have that history of what Mary Brooksbank did and what her achievements were. And despite being the only woman with an inscription on the walls of the Scottish Parliament building, which is a disgrace in itself, by the way, and despite having a centre and a library named after her, I don't think she still gets the recognition that she deserves in this city and beyond. On Tuesday, Bernadette and I went to the McManus Galleries and we asked what they had on show from Mary Brooksbank. The only exhibit on display was her violin, which is currently unattributed in a mock-up of a pawn shop on Dundee Streets exhibition. Doesn't seem right to me. That doesn't seem enough to honour what that woman did in her life. Like many others, my first encounter with Mary Brooksbank came through learning socialist songs, and of course the Jute Mill song, which we'll sing together in a wee bit. But as I learned more about Dundee's working class history, Mary Brooksbank became a real beacon of hope in the class struggle. For me, her breadth of political understanding, her internationalism, her unwavering courage as a communist woman, and her belief in collective action was highly significant. She knew that change didn't come through individuals. It came through unions, through movements, through class consciousness and class action. Remarkable as she was, she knew that we get our strength from each other, from support, from solidarity. I'm going to read an extract from a poem of her called Courage. And I think it shows in this poem that together we can turn this world upside down. We can change things. We can make things better. It's called Courage. Courage I'll show in the face of adversity. Though traitors surround me, I'll still remain true. What though our enemies hate and revile me, I'll keep my ideals as fresh as the dew. Freedom from want, from life's insecurity. Freedom from fear of the world's privileged few. Freedom from those who would shackle all reason. Freedom to fashion world friendships anew. Courage we need, for our foes they are powerful. Millionaire, press magnate, lord, baron and peer scream through their yellow press vituperation. Their tirade's the measure, how great is their fear. This woman, through her songs and her poetry, has touched the hearts of many, and it's her humanity that shines through in her work. Despite the suffering that she and her family clearly experienced, she refused to be brutalised. She refused to be dehumanised. She knew the importance of culture, of poetry, of song, of friendship, of love and of solidarity. She displays empathy and love and humour. Till the end of her days, she sees herself as part of a worldwide movement to liberate humankind. At 73, she's not taking it easy. She's not saying, oh, well, I've done enough now, there's nothing left to be done. Instead, at 73, she's in Hanoi. She's helping to rebuild for the B-52 bombers that have bombarded the place. What a woman. She said it was the most satisfying experience of her life. Well, comrades and friends, there's still plenty to be done. And I think that the best way that we can commemorate Mary Brooksbank is through our collective action against injustice, against prejudice, and against poverty. She dedicated her life to the overthrow of capitalism. Now, whether we are 14, as she was when she took part in her first strike, or whether we're in our 80s, we can do our same. Our time's no done. We can still be part of the class struggle. I want to say happy birthday to Mary, to our Mary, and I want to say to her, thank you for the inspiration that you've given us all. Thanks. I'm now going to ask Bernadette, my pal, and I had a daughter of Lochee, to help us lead the singing of the Mill song. Now, loads of people here know it, so please join in, because our voices are a bit scratchy with this weather, and it's not going to be easy. And my hand's shaking for some inexplicable reason. It must be the cold. Ready?
Oh dear me, the mill's getting fast. The pair we shifters canna get near rest. Shifting bobbins, coursin' fine, they fairly make you work for your 10 and 9. Oh dear me, I wish the day was done. Running up and down the pass is daily fun. Shifting piece and spinning, warp, weft and twine, to feed and plet my bare knees, half and 10 and 9. Oh dear me, the mill's getting fast. The pair we shifters canna get near rest. Shifting bobbins, coursin' fine, they fairly make you work for your 10 and 9. Oh dear me, the world's still divided. Them that work the hardest, I the least provided. I must be contented, dark days are fine. 'Tis no much pleasure living, half and 10 and 9. Oh dear me, the mill's getting fast. The pair we shifters canna get near rest. Shifting bobbins, coursin' fine, they fairly make you work for your 10 and 9.
Thank you for that. That is brilliant. Oh, hello. Sorry, I will not get too distracted by the lovely dog. The last speaker I'm going to invite up. Hang on. Put a pause on that. Brief announcement. After this, we're going to the pub. Everyone's invited. We were initially going to have Madaram, who are a brilliant trad band. Unfortunately, we are also in the middle of a pandemic and one of them is self-isolating. So we do not have tunes of the professional kind for you, but we can all sing, I'm sure. It sounds like you have lovely voices. Maybe I will make you all sing at once. Kidding, come to the pub. Anchor Bar's just up the road. Now, back to where I was before. The last speaker I'm going to invite up is a great MSP who has been absolutely instrumental in helping to maintain the popularity, or the semi-popularity, I will be humble here, of the left within the Scottish Parliament. And has also been someone who has been very, very constructive in ensuring that there are ongoing coalitions built on the left, whether from the Green Party, where she is a member, to the Labour Party in its various forms, to the SNP. It is very, very important that we, at various points where we overlap, find friendship where we can. And so, with that attempt at an introduction, I will now ask Mackie Chapman to hit the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that very kind introduction. It's very, very good to be here. I must say I feel a little bit like a fraud. How do I follow Siobhan and Mary, who have not only the knowledge and the lived experience of Lochee, but also a very, very clear commitment to the life and work that Mary Brooksbank started 124 years ago. As you'll know, I was elected as one of the Scottish Green MSPs in May this year to represent the North East, and I am very, very proud to represent this part of the country particularly. I think there is so much that Dundee has to show the world. There is so much that Dundee has to show how we should be doing our politics and how our politics should be better than it has been. And I think people like Mary Brooksbank are at the heart of that. If I can say and echo some of the things that Siobhan and Mary have already said, one of the things that strikes me about Mary's life, and I confess I didn't know much about her either until I started digging around the radical and left history of some of the lesser known people in Scottish politics. But it's clear to me that her commitment to trade unionism, to solidarity, to collective action is something that we have to sustain. It's something that we know as the world emerges from whatever the last 20 months has been, as we build something different, that solidarity has to be at the centre of what we do. As Siobhan and Mary have also said, that sense of intergenerational and community value is really, really important. And we can learn so much from Mary, who lived through the century to change all centuries. The second thing that really strikes me about Mary's life and what she did was, as a woman taking some very radical steps, taking some very for many reasons, very brave actions. It's great to have that kind of role model, not only for our work here in Dundee, my work in Parliament, our work as we fight for a better world on the left here and elsewhere. But I think it is so important for us to remember the radical role that women have played in our politics and the radical leadership that women have shown. And I hope to be able to be just a small part of that future for a better Dundee, a better North East, a better Scotland. Because we know so much about how different our politics is when women are directly involved, when women's voices are heard, and when women's work is taken seriously. We know that women have borne the brunt of the pandemic over the last 20 months. It has been women who have been more likely to lose their jobs, women who have been more likely to be taken off furlough and made redundant, women who have had to take up the majority of unpaid care and domestic work as people had different work and different employment situations over the last 20 months. We need to change that. That's not good enough now. It's never been good enough, and it shouldn't be a function or a feature of our future. The last thing I want to say, and Mary mentioned Mary Brooksbank's violin, that's not recognised appropriately. I think one of the things, yes, Mary's words are on the wall of the Scottish Parliament, and that matters. But more than that, I think there's something really, really important about hearing the stories of ordinary folk told in our cultural history and our cultural memory. We don't do that enough. The role of culture in our politics has to be made much more visible, much more known about, and that culture, because it is through folk narrative, folk stories, folk music that we actually pass down knowledge of people like Mary, but also of how they have won the battles that they have won. They give us hope, they give us a way of thinking about the world, and they show us that although we are still fighting many of the same struggles that we've been fighting, and people like Mary have been fighting for the last century, we are not fighting them alone. We are part of something bigger than ourselves. And if Mary's music, Mary's poetry, and the cultural value that she has given us can teach us something, I think it's that. solidarity not only in politics, but solidarity in community. Thank you very much again for being here out in the sunny, misty cold. Great to be with you. And yes, let's take Mary's legacy and build a better Dundee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Maggie. I will make this very brief because if you're like me, you can't feel your fingers anymore, and the only way to fix that is in the pub. So we'll go quick. I have one more thing to hawk to you guys, and it is an absolutely beautiful poster that our RSP graphic designer Seamus McGuigan has done. Connor, if you can be our display. It is absolutely beautiful. Those with keen eyes will see that that is the stack in the background there. Lovely. We're going to get one of those on some canvas for our flat because I love it so much. Any donation is acceptable for one of them. We are absolutely thrilled. We are also still collecting for the Lochee larder, so also to Connor, cans, money, whatever. We would love to have it. Now, because my teeth are starting to chatter, let's get out of here. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. This has been a really lovely way to spend an afternoon. And solidarity forever, folks. Woo!